Hey brothers, Mike here. It's Man Talk Monday, and today I wanted to talk to you about why weakness and vulnerability are actually essential to real masculinity. I've been spending some time lately kind of out there in YouTube, on Instagram, and just looking to see what is being presented to a lot of us guys about what it means to be a man. And a lot of what I'm hearing is this kind of stuff. You need to get your shit together. You need to clean up your room. You need to get in shape. You need to get your finances in order. You need to get a job. You need to put your life in order. You need to be a man. You need to toughen up. You need to, etc., etc., etc. Basically, some version of you need to be a man, and you need to show up as a man, and you need to be strong. That is not bad advice as far as it goes, honestly, but it is woefully incomplete. And I think maybe we all kind of sense that. I don't know if you do. We all kind of sense that because there's something that's pretty much attractive about it. There's something true about it, but there's also something of it that kind of smacks of a caricature. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about where weakness and vulnerability come into the picture. So there are 4 kinds of strength that a man has to grapple with and has to reckon with in order to come into this, to his fullness as a man. There is physical strength. You got to figure out how to hold your body, how to be in your physicality. You have to answer the question of what you're going to do with your strength, and do you have what it takes? And you have to get into your body, learn how to work with it, learn how to use it, learn how to not only not abuse it, but not to use it in an abusive way, right? So yeah, physical strength. But there's also emotional strength, and there's also intellectual strength, and there's also spiritual strength. These are all reflected in the book King, Warrior, Magician, Mage, Magician, Lover that Robert Moore wrote. If you haven't read his book, I think every man should read that book. It's a great reflection on the development of masculinity over the years, what we know about it over history, what are kind of archetypal things we need to know about it. And he talks about those 4 kinds of strength through the lens of the 4 archetypes: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And you have to develop as a man all of those strengths. And that means you have to have courage in all those ways. So it isn't just about physical courage. And that's what a lot of this stuff that you hear, or I'm hearing, on the interwebs these days seems to be mostly focused on, is physical courage and a little bit of magical courage, a little bit of the wizard, a little bit of the mage, but mostly physical courage. But you also need to have emotional courage, and you also need to have spiritual courage, and you need to have a lot of magical courage, or mage courage, or intellectual courage is what I would call it. Now, it begs the question, why do you need courage? If it's something that is easy, then you don't need courage. But it's hard. And what makes it hard is that in order for any man to grow into the fullness of who he is, what he has to move toward is not his strength. He has to move toward his weakness. He has to move toward the things that make him vulnerable, the things that expose him, the things that show his tender underbelly. So you know this in the physical realm. When you move toward learning a new skill physically, when you try to start a new sport, when you get into some kind of, maybe it is like some kind of combat training, you figure out pretty quickly that what you don't know what to do. You know where you're incompetent, you know your weak areas, and you expose yourself to looking vulnerable, feeling vulnerable, being vulnerable, and knowing your weakness and exposing it to everyone around you. That is essential to the process of you growing into your strength as a man physically. That's why it requires courage. And the same thing, though, is true for emotional vulnerability, for emotional strength, for emotional courage. If you don't know the only way you can know how to move toward emotional wholeness is by moving toward the places where you feel emotionally vulnerable, where you feel emotionally weak, and exposing those things in a safe environment with people who will accept and love you. That is part of what it means to grow into the fullness of your masculinity. That's not something else. That's part of being a man. How will you tenderly love your daughter? How will you tenderly love your son? How will you tenderly love your spouse if you don't learn how to be a lover? It's one of the 4 archetypes of masculinity. So, and that requires you to move toward weakness and vulnerability. That's part of the deal. Same goes for intellectual strength. You have to be willing to test your own ideas. You have to be willing to move toward people who don't think like you. You can't live your whole life in a bubble and just pretend that you automatically know what's right because you're convinced. That's all there is to it. The truth of the matter is, you're wrong. There is no single human being on this planet that is so wise that has it all figured out. Every single one of us is wrong about something. And if we can learn how to have the appropriate humility intellectually and acquire the right kind of curiosity to move toward the places where we might be not thinking very rigorously, where we're not actually recognizing our own confirmation bias, where we're not willing, and we recognize we're not willing to have a conversation with someone who makes us uncomfortable, that's where we actually grow as men. That's where we actually become intellectually resilient and strong and able to go anywhere intellectually. That's intellectual strength. That's also part of what it means to be a man. And then there's spiritual strength, which requires an immense amount of vulnerability and weakness. This is the part of masculinity that is associated with the archetype of the king. It is the highest form of masculine expression. And everything you read, everything you see about kingship in the archetypal sense, it is understood as something you are channeling. You are connecting with the divine. You're connecting with God. You are in service of God. And so the only way you can do that is by moving towards your own weakness. You step into kingship through an act of surrender, not an act of conquest. And the men who actually move into kingship through an act of conquest are those that become despots, those that become tyrants. And that is part of the shadow. So I want to read you a couple of different quotes that talk about this, why weakness and vulnerability are essential to real masculinity. The first one is from Emerson, good old Emerson, where he talks explicitly about this. And I'll put these quotes down in the description below as well. He says, "Our strength grows out of weakness." Right there. "The indignation which arms itself with secret forces does not awaken until we are pricked and stung and sorely assailed." In our kind of English, it'd mean you don't wake up to the fact that you need to grow until you're knocked down. A great man is always willing to be little. Whilst he sits on the cushion of advantages, he goes to sleep. When he is pushed, tormented, defeated, he has a chance to learn something. He has been put on his wits, on his manhood. He has gained facts, learns his ignorance, is cured of the, catch this, the insanity of conceit, right? Has got moderation and real skill. The wise man throws himself on the side of his assailants. It is more his interest than it is theirs to find his weak point. The wound cicatrices and falls off from him like a dead skin when they would triumph. Lo, he has passed on invulnerable. That's it. That's the journey. So you move from one level of maturity to the next in your masculine journey through weakness. It's just like the hero's journey, where you go through out of the land of the known. You end up going to a cave, and that cave at the bottom of the circle always involves a death and resurrection. It always involves a surrender. It always involves a death. So all this talk you see out there in the manosphere about how it's always going to be up and to the right, you're just going to have one victory after another. You're going to dominate. You're going to kill it. You're going to just keep winning and winning and winning. That is boy talk. Just plain and simple. That is boy masculinity. It is not man masculinity. And if you want man masculinity, if you want mature masculinity, you need to understand how to engage your weakness and how to do it in a generative way. You need to know how to be tender and vulnerable and weak just as much as you need to know how to be strong and powerful and resilient. Those are equally part of what it means to be a whole, powerful man. I'm going to read you another quote. This one's coming out of the Bible. It's by the Apostle Paul. It's in the book of 2 Corinthians, where he talks about his own weakness and how it works for him. So this is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 7. And he says, he's writing to some people in Corinth, and he says, because of the extraordinary greatness of the revelations, and he's talking about something that God had shown him, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, remember that, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh. We don't know what that was. Who knows? Something that really bugged him. Let's put it that way. It had hindered him physically. A messenger from Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in distresses, in persecutions, in difficulties, on behalf of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. See, he gets it. He gets it. The way to strength is the way of weakness. The way to victory is the way of defeat. And if you don't understand that about what it means to become a full-fledged warrior, a full-fledged man, a full-fledged king, a full-fledged lover, a full-fledged magician, then you'll never get there. And all you'll do is what the shadow does. And the shadow only has 2 cards to play. The shadow part of masculinity only has 2 cards to play. It either puffs up or it collapses. Right? So you're either going to puff up into this big chest pumping, facade that anyone with any kind of depth can see through in a half second, but which will fool a lot of people all the same, where you pretend that you are all that, basically, that you're the shit. And you just keep acting that out, and you convince yourself, maybe, I don't know. So you just keep puffing up all the time, and whenever somebody challenges you, you puff up more. And you got to keep doing that. You can't ever stop that game. Or the other one is you collapse. Rather than try to pretend your strength is greater than it actually is, you abdicate your strength altogether and just throw your crown away. You throw your sword to the ground and you give someone else the keys to the kingdom because you don't want the responsibility, or you don't want to hurt anybody, or whatever your reason is, but you just throw your man card away. And both of those are shadow, and both of those are boy. They're not man. So if you're doing either one of those things, wherever you're doing that, that's boy masculinity. It's not man masculinity. There's nothing wrong with boy masculinity. Let me just make that clear. There's nothing wrong with it. There is something wrong with getting stuck there. That's not where we're supposed to stay. I'll read you one more quote and then I'll close out. This is from Jacob Nordby, and he says this. I love this quote so much. It says, "I don't want to hear from those who preach joy without struggle, who talk of endless love that doesn't require a journey through hell to find it, who splash Pollyanna paint on everything in hope of hiding from the darker colors. I want to sit in a circle with comrades in arms who've seen it all and have yet a pirate's gleam in their eyes. And their teeth flash in laughter by the firelight, telling their tales from the road. I want to know these broken and then healed ones," right? who found treasures in their Fisher King quests and have now reclaimed a castle home with all the humble pride of Parsifal. I want to know you, fellow travelers, if what you have found is only yours, hard won, stripped bare of everything, and worth having. That's it. That's what we all want. We all want to be surrounded with men who are like that. So I have a couple of questions for you to send you on your way. One is, where are you hiding your weaknesses? Where are you hiding where you're weak? And where do you refuse to be vulnerable? Just think about your life. Like, is it in your relationships with your loved ones? Is it at work? Is it in your body? Is it in, where is it? Where do you hide your weakness? Where do you refuse to be vulnerable? Wherever that is, you, my friend, are playing the boy, not the man. And that's where you need to grow up, and that's where you need to do your work. And the first step of that, and it's a powerful step, it's the transformative step that changes the game. The first step of that is to get with a group of guys that you trust and spill the beans. Come clean, expose your weakness, hold nothing back, no pretense, no puffing up or collapsing, just tell the truth. Share your weakness, be vulnerable. That's all. And see where it goes from there. That's my word for the day today. Man Talk Monday. Hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again in a future video.